Her pronouncement perforated the prevailing silence like fractured glass, scattering across stone. Unrelated residents must remit tenancy fees. Should you find this unacceptable, you are free to vacate. I exhibited no reaction. I offered no resistance. I simply permitted the devastating import of her statement to fully resonate within the space. My wife Sarah's complexion instantly paled as she whispered, "Dad, are you cognizant of the gravity of your assertion?" But he was not. Not yet. That singular moment affirmed my understanding. He had irrevocably sanctioned his own demise. I was incapable of suppressing the laughter that escaped a sound of chilling finality. Entirely devoid of emotion, verging on malevolent satisfaction, I distinctly recollect our first introduction. He offered a strained, rehearsed smile. "We welcome you to the family," he stated. Yet his eyes were entirely contradictory. They assessed me as an unwelcome interloper, not a prospective I harbored the naive belief that the passage of time would mitigate his intransigence. I convinced myself that matrimony, genuine affection, and sustained forbearance would eventually secure his esteem. I was profoundly gullible. In his assessment, I was a usurper, an outsider who had somehow co-opted his daughter's filial devotion. Throughout the inaugural year, he successfully masked his antagonism beneath a veneer of polite indifference. The second year saw it emerge in pointed remarks disguised as witty observations. By the third, he dispensed with all pretense of concealment. But I persisted, not due to personal weakness, but because I was engaged in an active, comprehensive analysis of his character. Every subtle sneer, every calculated maneuver to alienate my wife, every demarcation he established between his core family and myself was carefully observed. The relational foundation developed critical fractures when he aggressively interjected himself into our joint finances. He would perpetually request substantial loans from Sarah, exploiting her inherent inability to deny her father. He disseminated malicious slander in my absence, portraying me as manipulative and lacking in gratitude. Then came the unequivocal error. I uncovered concealed invoices, documentation of large-scale transfers, and irrefutable evidence of considerable capital depletion. The funds were not allocated for domestic necessities, but were instead fueling his clandestine gambling addiction. I did not raise my voice. I did not rush into immediate confrontation. I practiced patience, recognizing that betrayal offers an invaluable tactical advantage. It precisely illuminates the enemy's critical vulnerability. My wife remained wholly oblivious. She clung tenaciously to the idealized archetype of the paternal figure she cherished. I permitted her willful blindness. I required her absolute ignorance until the strategically predetermined moment. Asterisk, asterisk. My planning was executed discreetly, legally, and with exhaustive attention to detail. I constructed the entirety of my legal position in complete silence, systematically preserving every digital capture, every bank record, every piece of verifiable evidence. I engaged specialized legal representation under the pretext of professional obligations. I strategically sequestered my private capital into an insulated account entirely beyond his access. Most crucially, I concentrated my study on his most destructive traits: his overwhelming pride, his pathological need for control, and his entrenched arrogance. These were designated as the vectors of his inevitable downfall. The confrontation materialized sooner than anticipated. He violently intruded into our home one evening, his eyes ablaze, vehemently demanding to know why I exercised apparent authority over the premises. It was then that he delivered the self-incriminating assertion, "Unrelated residents must remit tenancy fees. Should you find this unacceptable, you are free to vacate." His daughter instantly froze. My cardiac rhythm normalized to a deliberate pace. The entire intricate scheme I had meticulously prepared aligned flawlessly, like a cascading sequence of mechanisms. I offered a slight smile. "If that truly encapsulates your position, then let us formally commit it to contractual documentation." She registered momentary confusion. My wife observed us, clearly conflicted. She remained unaware that I had already constructed the snare. The subsequent week, he was served with a formally executed, legally ratified correspondence, a comprehensive lease agreement, precisely drafted in his name, obligating him under the terms of his own spontaneous declaration. I had first presented the document to my wife, framing it as a diplomatic means to establish familial boundaries. By publicly declaring me a stranger, this contract forced him to substantiate that claim legally. She appended her signature immediately. Her hand, guided by profound, albeit misplaced guilt. He signed purely as an act of supercilious pride, convinced he had cemented his ultimate psychological triumph. He was mistaken for concealed deep within the complex. Carefully constructed, clauses inserted with the expert assistance of my legal counsel was a decisive contingent, transfer of property ownership, the residence his source of pride, his perceived impregnable fortress, his absolute dominion would, in the event of an anticipated breach of contract default, become legally and unchallengeably our possession. My conviction regarding his inevitable default was absolute. His existence was fundamentally predicated on financial liabilities and profound self-deception. The day the foreclosure was executed, he stormed into the kitchen, violently brandishing the legal documents, his voice cracking with genuine, unmasked distress for the first time. You deliberately manipulated me. I did not elevate my voice. I did not condescend to gloat. I simply fixed my gaze upon him and stated, "No, you entirely disclosed your true nature. I merely transcribed your terms." My wife remained seated in petrified silence, finally compelled to recognize the manipulative reality of her father, the man who had casually designated his son-in-law a stranger, the man who preferred to jeopardize his sole asset than offer me genuine acceptance. His perceived reign collapsed entirely because of a single signature, and he had willingly provided me with the instrument of his undoing. The sound I produced that day was not one of conventional joy. It was the sound of absolute liberation. Years of his patronizing superiority, his insidious emotional manipulation, his ceaseless compulsion to render me insignificant, tall, systematically nullified by his own blinding arrogance. Do you comprehend the most exquisite auditory experience? It is not the collective applause of triumph. It is the deep, echoing silence that follows your adversary's realization that they have, in fact, been the orchestrator of their own inescapable captivity. Now, when I pass him within the halls of the residence that was once his exclusive territory, he is incapable of maintaining eye contact. He has been systematically reduced to a mere tenant within the domain he once ferociously commanded, an outsider compelled to remit tenancy fees, his own destructive utterances meticulously converted into palpable reality, and I experience no empathy. I harbor no guilt. I possess only absolute tranquility, because vengeance is neither noisy nor overtly aggressive. It is precise, and the ultimate form of retribution is simply bestowing upon an individual the ruinous existence they maliciously intended for you. He desired my status as an outsider. He now financially remunerates that status literally, and every month, as that rental payment is silently processed into my personal account, I find myself incapable of resisting a knowing smile. Justice does not require formal invitation. It enters quietly, validated by your enemy's own legal signature.